when all is said and done, we just know it was Sochi. Hey there folks, and welcome to this video, and here I'm going to be giving my personal opinion on what was the best race of the 2020 F1 season. Of course, we've had a week to think about this now. Not that we need to do much thinking after the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. But it's time to look back on what 2020's F1 season has been, and not talk about the disposable barbecue that's currently sitting on my bedroom floor. So, I'm going to make a case for a handful of races that I think were the best, and then give my personal verdict on which one is. So let's start off with the British Grand Prix. That was quite an interesting race, the British Grand Prix. I think, however, the problem is a lot of it is summed up by, for example, the tyre failures that we saw. The quite dramatic fashion in which Lewis Hamilton won the British Grand Prix. That was impressive. But at the same time, it took something like that happening to make the British Grand Prix anywhere near something important. And I think that's similar for a lot of races. And I mean, ones that stand out for me are ones like the Hungarian Grand Prix, where Max Verstappen had the broken suspension, Red Bull fixed it, and then he went on to just stay out of trouble for the rest of the race. Take second place away from Valtteri Bottas. But there are a few that I think are quite good contenders. The Eiffel Grand Prix, for example, of course it was made more interesting by the retirement from the likes of Valtteri Bottas. But I think that was a decent race. The Sakir Grand Prix, just because it was something different. A high-speed track that we hadn't seen before in F1 with the fastest laps in F1's history. And it had so much drama in it. Of course, helped by a first lap crash where Charles Leclerc locked up and hit Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen drove into a wall. But I think that has got to be a contender as well. I don't think necessarily the likes of the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix should be on there. I mean, it was great to see racing at Imola, but it didn't provide as much of a spectacle. And that means it was slowly whittling away at which ones it could be. And for me, it's got to be what was the most emotional Grand Prix of the season. It's got to be Monza. I mean, of course, we were helped by lots of drama. Vettel's brake failure, the crash for Leclerc, Magnussen's power unit failure that led to a penalty for the likes of Lewis Hamilton. There were a lot of things that helped contribute to it. But at the end of the day, Bottas wasn't there to take the win. We had a podium that was made up of quote-unquote midfield teams, the likes that we didn't see on podiums for ages. And to top it all off, the winner was Pierre Gasly. So, I mean, I'm looking through the rest of the season, and I think the Turkish Grand Prix, that was pretty fun. But at the same time, it was irritating that, well, for the Grand Prix weekend, we had the fact that the track was so fresh that drivers couldn't get any grip. That was sort of negated by the fact it was raining. And the fashion in which Lewis Hamilton claimed his title was spectacular. But I think that it was one that, I mean, all of them were helped by some kind of drama. It was sort of washed over, forgive the pun, the issues of the Grand Prix weekend by the fact that it was raining. So for me, it has to be Monza. To have seen Gasly take the win, to see that battle right to the line with Carlos Sainz. and to see Stroll take a podium as well. Lando 4th. Yeah, I just remember watching that final lap in my bedroom and just... I was standing up. I was full of, like, so much kind of tension. I was like, come on, come on. And I just screamed the moment Pierre won. And cried. Because, for me, that was quite a symbolic win. I couldn't do that the same for Checo, because, of course, with the Sakir Grand Prix, I was actually doing a endurance race and iRace in the 6 hours of Spa. So I wasn't able to do the same kind of reaction. But for me, the Sakir Grand Prix was... It was up there. It has to be. But... I feel like a lot of that factor was for me because the track was so different. And I hope when the 22 regs come in, that we end up seeing more tracks like that. Or races at tracks like that. Maybe the Bahrain Grand Prix switches to the outer layout for a season. But, I mean... It was the last race that we saw the Williams family in charge of the Williams team in F1. It was a race that we saw one of 2 new winners in 2020. And we saw a podium with people who'd only had like a podium or been on there. I think that's all pretty special. But of course, you're welcome to disagree. Like I said, there are a handful of races that I could think of which would be in contention for this. But, I mean, even though Lewis managed to fight back to be, 17 seconds off the pace at the end of the race, it wasn't a Grand Prix that Mercedes were looking like they were going to dominate. It looked like it could have been a good weekend for any Honda-powered team. But at the end of it, Albon was in 15th, Verstappen had retired, and Kvyat was in 9th. And Gasly won. Yeah, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours, and thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you around. Bye for now.